Okay. This is Robert Newman. I'm here with Bret Wallace, and we're going to be talking about ROI today. So buckle up, Buttercup. We got a good few minutes for you. I have only told you the broad subject matter of this review video. I did not ask you to, like, I didn't pre-prepare you or ask you to say something specific, right, Bret?
100%.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is Bret and I have been trying to figure out ROI. I'm going to tell everybody who's watching this very transparently, we still haven't 100% figured that out. What we're going to be talking about is estimates, broad strokes that Bret believes to be true, but he isn't tracking specifically and has said that to me many times. We're just going to be broadly looking at his numbers and making some big estimates, which I will be making, and Bret will either agree with or not agree with. So let's get started. So we have 4 categories that we've helped you with. We have your YouTube channel, we have your website traffic, we have your hyperlocal profile, and we have the sponsored ads in your hyperlocal profile, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let's start with the YouTube stuff. You've got 50,000 views off your YouTube channel, which you really didn't have in place at all until you and I started doing. Well, for the audience, there's 2 ways that people make money with me. 1, they just let the services roll out, or 2, they're like Bret and they're very proactive. They get me to give them advice. They act on my advice, and then they watch the ROI come in. Bret is mostly going to be a guy who has ROI from advice that I've given that he's taken. Would you agree with that, Bret?
Absolutely. In all those categories, obviously I enlisted your services to start with helping me build a website. But after I talked to you, you're like, hey, building a website's kind of child's play. I'm more of a data scientist. I'm more concerned with how the website performs and how we can create inbound lead generation. So that's how I initially reached out to you, just because you put out so much information online and I found you and booked a call. But yeah, you're right. It's evolved, and I mean, you're almost half my website and half my business consultant. So most of your, if not all your advice, but you'll be the first one that tells you, like, hey, let's test this. This might fall flat on our face or might strike gold. Most of the time it works out. So I'll take the averages you've been giving me.
Good. So let's talk about those averages for a moment. YouTube, we have 40 to 50. When I messaged you, I did say, hey, one of the things I'm going to ask about is YouTube, and I'm going to ask you how many calls. And in Bret fashion, you actually responded to the question. You actually gave me the answer, even though I wasn't technically looking for it. You said, hey, I think I've gotten 40 to 50 calls, and this would be over about 2 years. That's the timeline, 2 years, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking just this year. I mean,
oh,
so
this year.
It could be closer to 60 to 75 because it's definitely gained. I think the first videos I was doing was you showed me a video of you in Oregon with one of your clients. And it was very guerrilla style. It wasn't like super, fancy edits, and it was just somebody, in the shotgun seat driving through neighborhoods. And you're like, this is what people want to see. Drive through a neighborhood. Doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about jump cuts and all these things. And people are watching the video to see what you're filming and just talk and kind of narrate, just real low key, just chill and have fun. And my wife literally did those with our iPhone 11. This is like 2 years ago. I think the Sienna one has 10,000 views, and I think the Harvest Green has 8,000. So just off 2 videos that you told me to do, or strongly encouraged me to do, which literally we didn't make any edits. It was press record, and it was 10 or 12 minutes on those 2. So,
nice.
So yeah, that was the first year, and then the second year we added another 30 neighborhoods. So I think we're up to like 50 neighborhoods, and we're working on like 12 or 13 more. So I mean, there's not much more in the county that I'm gonna be able to like build some more new neighborhoods, guys. But yeah, I'd probably say 40 to 50 calls in 2021, like 1 a week easily. And those aren't just calls like
well, let's hold on. Let me ask you a question, because that's the next question. So great. Let's just go with 1 a week. All right. 1 a week. And of the 1 a week, what would you say your actual close ratio is? The objective of this recording, everybody, is to give an estimate. It's just an estimate, but I'm here with my client, and we're going to estimate together what his ROI on my services have been. We're going to be completely transparent. That's what the subject of this video is. So And Bret, just do you mind if I share roughly what your investment has been over the 2 years?
Yeah, tell me, because I don't know. I know it's
Okay.
worth it, so I don't really get down to the dollars and cents.
It's been about 22 or 23,000 to date is how much you've invested in 2 years. 2 years and 2 months. It's 22,000 to 23,000. That includes the website rebuild and the original cost of the entire first contract. So that's, and the fact that you increased the contract the second time around. So that's where we're at, about 23,000 all in. Okay.
Yep.
So that's the number we're looking at. So you've gotten a call a week. How many of those calls would you say to close? Like 25%, 1 out of 4? Would that be a guess?
I would say, because I started getting at your encouragement, I started to get a little bit more. I mean, I have Follow Up Boss, CRM, right? But I mean, I'm trying to be a little bit more organized and tracking, because you got to track your expenses. But I would probably say 1 out of 5.
1 out of 5.
Maybe.
Let's just use that number. So 1 out of 5. So the number is going to be a 20% conversion rate off of 40 or 50 calls this year, 20 the first year. So 70 calls total. That would mean that 70, let me just do the math.
14.
14 transactions off YouTube. And your average transaction price is 350, or is that too high?
Yeah, that'd probably be pretty close. 325, 350.
Let's just do 325. So everybody that's watching this knows that I'm using the lower numbers. You know I'm using the lower numbers. Everybody knows I'm using the lower numbers. So we're 14 times 325. So that's 4,500,000 so far, but we're not done yet. 4,500,000 so far in total sales, but we're not actually finished, because we have your hyperlocal, profile, which is something different. So I'm going to share the screen here for a second. Part of what I've done with my consultation, we built, this is one of the things that both the work and the consultation has come up in, which is where we do a search like Sugarland Realtor. That's a hyperlocal thing. And you get these people right here. Here's Bret. Okay, he pays for this. It was on my advice that he put himself in this search packet, but he pays for it. I have nothing to do with it. Bret did he signed up. He pays for the ads. That's 100% on Bret. But the other thing is, usually he's here. He's not here in this example, of course, because I'm recording it. But usually Bret is one of the very first people in these hyperlocal search profiles when you search for Sugarland Realtors. So that's plural. Let's try Sugarland Realtor singular and see if we get a different result. Yeah, he's number 1. So when you search for Realtor, Google is making the assumption that you're looking for an individual professional. Bret's number 1. When you say Realtors, it's making the assumption that you're looking for a brokerage. So Bret's not going to rank for that, or he's not ranking well for that. So Bret is number 1 when we search for Sugarland Realtor. So Bret, you are coming up here, number 1, and you're also placing decently in the Google screen package. So the Google screen, we got you in here right when this service launched. You were my first, like one of my first people I reached out to and said, hey, will you test this for me? Maybe 2 weeks after they changed over to it. And now you've been in it for what, 6 months? Is that right? You muted yourself, buddy. There you go.
I don't know. Maybe just automatically I didn't want to hear what I wanted to say.
So what did you say?
7 months. I think it went, we did the screening, which it's not the easiest, but that's the point. I think it went live like in March or April. So let's just say 8 months.
8 months. Now, in those 8 months, how many calls would you say you've gotten off it? 8 months, how many calls?
It's, again, like you said, I think how you suggest things like, hey, let's try this. I think Google was trying this. They were working out the kinks in the first few months, because in March or in April and May, I was getting 1 call a week, 2 calls a week. But it's cool because it only charges you per call. And if it's not a good call, it's recorded, so you can dispute it. So that's why I really liked this version. And then I would go a month or 2 with no calls. and a lot of more people were finding out about this. So that's why when you told me, you're like, get on this now. It really was pretty hot when I jumped in. And then they were trying to distribute leads to newer agents that are joining the screen portion. But overall, I'd probably say I've gotten 20 calls. I've disputed some of them that weren't the best. But when you talk about this is a one-time setup, and it does give you prominent, it does give you presence when people are searching. So I think I'm probably into it for maybe $1,000 that I've spent on phone calls. And I got one for sure sale already that was 450,000. So that's a $13,500 commission. And I spent maybe $1,000 on the phone calls. So 1,300% ROI. And I have one more in queue right now that I'm working, stemming from a phone call from the Google screened. So it could end up being a 2,000, 20x.
Let's just go with everybody that's watching. Let's just go with what we've done. I always underestimate dramatically when I'm doing these ROI videos. I take the lowest numbers that my clients are giving me every time, which usually means when you are looking at the numbers on my website, usually there's actually much more there than what you're seeing. So we've got one sale that you've done, full stop, already done for 450. You got about 20 calls. So we're up to about 70 phone calls. Now the website hasn't produced as many leads as either one of us would like, physically produce leads, but it has started to produce some leads. Have you been getting any phone calls off the actual site that you can identify, like the phone calls off the website?
Again, we've been trying to do kind of like some deeper dives into who's signing up. Obviously it's web-based. Some aren't, some are legit and some are not.
If the answer is no, just say it. Say it in recording, say it on the video. If the answer is no, let's just say no.
Whenever somebody calls me, they have been on my site, but then I ask, I'm like, hey, so what page landed you there first? Most of the time they say your neighborhood YouTube videos. So gotcha. When somebody calls and I say, hey, how'd you find me? And they say homesoffortbend.com. I found that website from the zip code map a couple times, maybe once or twice.
Okay.
But all the other stuff I'm doing in conjunction, the website is like validation. And again, and all the stuff we do leads them to the website, because Google My Business, which I know is going to be another quadrant of the stuff that you've guided me on, that's where people go when they are on Google Maps or just Googling.
Your ROI in every single one of these categories would not be nearly as high if you didn't have the anchor of the website. I know that for a fact. They may not be responding off the website anymore, and that's part of the point of this review call for everybody that's watching. I want them to understand that there's more than one way to be successful. Some websites act as an anchor for other strategies, which is what's happening with you, and we're proving it right now. Your website is an anchor to these other multi-channel strategies that we're discussing, all of which center around Google. You're becoming a really strong Google marketer through your relationship with me, because you're on all these Google properties and you're starting to pull down revenue off most of them. So sponsoreds, we've got that covered. Now I am going to ask you about that hyperlocal. What is the hyperlocal placement getting you in terms of calls?
Like the Google My Business, Google Maps?
Yeah.
I'm a lot more so than any other, that is the biggest pie, the slice of the pie, other than my like direct referrals from like my sphere of influence, from people I know that have used me before. The biggest slice of the pie from all calls, all reach outs is from Google My Business and Google Maps. I didn't even know Google Maps was I got a listing last year for $300,000 average price point around here. I said, how'd you find me? They said, Google Maps. I go, you mean Google? And they're like, no, Google Maps. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So yeah, Google, just the open source Google searches account for probably more calls than any other non-referral based call.
So if we're using that number and you're already seeing you're getting a call a week off YouTube, but you're saying you're getting more calls off Google My Business. Is it, what would we estimate that? Is it 2 calls a week? Is it 3 calls a
2 to
week?
2.5, at least double.
2.5. Let's just say 2.
Yeah, look,
Two
I'd say
calls per
2,
week.
yeah.
So that's 100 calls per year. How many of those do you think are closing?
I'd probably say 1 out of 4. I mean, like 25. I mean, like literally, if somebody's looking at my reviews, and that's the number one thing, that when people do call me off of Google and say, I found you on Google, I think the most important thing that they've found within Google are my reviews. And those are all, like, I didn't pay for any of those. Those aren't family members. Those are legit clients. And I know some people inflate the reviews, or they compile their whole office or their team. Like those were 58, 57, 58, 59 reviews that I've been asking for perpetually from clients when we close, and responding. That was the one thing. You're like, Bret, don't just get reviews. Tell somebody, tell them how thankful you are for leaving you a review, and actually spend more time thanking them than they did thanking you. So after every review, you'll see a response from the owner, which is me. And that's just more activity that Google's registering that, hey, this guy's active. And I usually, as soon as I see that review, I'm putting, a paragraph together about the transaction, how special they are to me, and how much we appreciate their business. So I think the reviews go further. I mean, you see me on a YouTube video, or you see my website. What is that? That there's no ombudsman, or there's no client speaking on your behalf and kind of giving you reviews. Because whenever we buy something on Amazon, you can bet we're going to that 2-star review with a picture on it. It's like that wrench broke, or that don't buy this, buyer beware. So reviews are really important. And I think Google is the hub when people are searching for that, especially in a service business such as ours.
Well, we're about ready to get to the exciting piece of information. Everybody, Bret's giving away some of my secret sauce in part of this. I'm just trying to get to the ROI, but everything he's telling you, I've at one point told him. And there's a method to make these services, make these profiles pay you, and pay you well. But we're going to find out how much they've paid Bret. All right. So can I ask you, are you going to mind if we go live and record, if I ask you some GCI questions, very general, very broad?
I don't care.
So last year, what was your total volume of sales? And if you don't mind sharing it, your GCI, but like for 2021, how much did you sell in general?
I'm terrible with the GCI. I know GCI because I know GCI. I don't volume.
Okay.
And this is how spur of the moment this is. With this, none of this was pre-planned, or else I would have had that number teed up. But it would take me a couple minutes to look into my transaction details. But,
that's fine. That's fine. GCI.
2020 GCI 294. This year's 294 for 2020. This year's GCI is going to be right around 318 to 320. Depending on how a couple of these last transactions, 320, let's just say 320 for 2021.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, just doing the rough math without Bret going back and checking his numbers, but so far based on his Google My Business, his YouTube, and his sponsored ads, we are at a total volume of, it's 50,000 shy of $14 million, which would mean that roughly speaking, a very large amount of his revenue. And there's something in here where the numbers don't quite add up, because Bret probably did get some referral traffic. But based on these numbers, my guess is going to be, let's take these, let's say they say that some of Bret's call stuff that he's saying are not correct, because that's where my guess would be. So instead of saying that he's getting 100 calls and we're selling 25%, which would put the volume from those calls at 9 million, let's just say it's 4,500,000. So 9 million of your total sales would come from various Google things that you did, which means that roughly speaking, $200,000 of your revenue would be coming from these various channels, which puts your ROI on my services at, so 200,000 versus, and that, by the way, is a single year. If we go back last year, let's just say it's 100,000. So half as much. Is that fair, Bret? Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I can tell you categorically, and I mean, obviously 2020 and 2021 has been a different year with COVID and just the craziness in the real estate market. Um, but I didn't crack 200,000. I did not crack $200,000 ever in my career. I don't know if it happens to just coincide with our work starting, 2 years ago, roughly together. But definitely 2018 and 2019, I was 175 kind of, plateauing because it was all referral based. And, there's only so many, phone calls and text messages and emails and handwritten note cards you can give to the same people. It was growing, but just very slowly.
Sure.
And I felt like I was kind of plateauing. And that's why I was like, I got to do something different. And that's,
Even using the numbers, like, let's just say that we take your increase and accredit it to your relationship with me. 174, then you did 294 and 318 this year. Let's just say that. Let's just go with that, right? Which, by the way, the number suggests that I'm responsible for more of your business than this. I'm saying that for all the people watching. That's still $240,000. Even at the lowest possible mathematical rate, it's $240,000, and you've spent 22,000. So ladies and gentlemen, in this particular case study, the ROI is 10 to 1. And honestly, if I was going to be really aggressive about analyzing Bret's numbers, it sounds like we would probably end up at something more like 15 to 1 on his investment. Now, Bret spends a ton of his own time. He is very proactive. And so it is, I give the advice, but Bret acts on the advice, and he spends his time with me talking about the advice, but the advice pays off big time. 10 to 1 is probably the most, I don't know of many other providers that you can get 10 to 1 from, even if you were following their advice. Would you say that that is true, Bret?
yeah, like I said, I was tickled to death just to get the one sale off the Google screen. Like, I mean, 12,000 commission off 1,000 spent. That's 1,200% ROI. So, I mean,
It's a big ROI, but you spent what, 4 or 5 hours setting the profile up because there was that going back and forth with Google, or is that correct?
yeah, probably you helped guide me on a little bit of that. But yeah, it was pretty quick and it was one time. But yeah, I mean, they legit are checking into you. Like, I mean, you're giving your driver's license number, social security. I mean, they're doing a background on you to make sure you're not some fly by night con artist. So it's just it's just one more element. But like you said, the Google, YouTube owned by Google, Google, the open source, then the screened ads, and then Google rankings of the website. It's just all, just pointing to each other. And it's like, so let's just get somebody in our revolving door.
Well, Bret, listen, you've done a few of these. I haven't published them all. I am definitely publishing this one. I like the way it turned out a little bit more, not because the content, not because of the data. The data has always been the same between the two of us, but this is the closest you and I have ever come to dialing in for sure what the ROI on your account is and where it's coming from specifically. You and I have been working towards this moment, this like data moment for 6 months, because I've asked you these questions many times and you've started to pay attention, a little more attention to where the source of your business is coming from. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And with the Google, and so if there's a little bit of confusion, I don't always see where, when somebody calls me off Google, the only one that I really know 100% for sure is the screened is the one that starts off with, "Hi, this is Bret. How may I help you?" This is a Google call or a Google. So the screened ads, which is, one out of the phone calls that we get that I've gotten 20 of roughly. That's the only time I know that's from the screen because it says it's recording you. All the other ones, the Google, the pay-per-click we were doing the campaign, or that I was doing, the Google My Business, the Google Images, I don't know. I just hear Google a lot of times. So that's maybe why I'm saying 2 a week. I'm just kind of lumping some of that together. But when people are checking me out through Google, because I think the power of the reviews, there's less of a barrier to kind of like have to break down between their comfort level, because it feels like I have a track record and they've looked at me through all the Google rankings. And like you said, in Fort Bend County, Sugar Land, I'm pretty high up there. So
Right.
yeah, that's kind of why some of those numbers might be garbled a little, but
That's okay.
really good
It's
conversion.
okay. I appreciate you doing any of this for me. And for everybody that's watching, I appreciate you taking the time. It's always for me, clients like Bret are the most